Welcome back to 15 Minutes of Finance. My name is Brandon, a CPA, and I'm going to help you keep more of your money. Now, today's topic is about avoiding mistakes in your 401k plan, and all of the things that I'm going to talk about are informed directly by actively looking at client 401k plans, looking at the individual participants of 401k plans that we advise on, that we manage, that we've helped set up, and seeing what are the mistakes or even maybe misconceptions that people have about 401k plans that cause them to fall short of the benefit that these plans truly could provide for participants. So first of all, before we get into the nitty-gritty about the mistakes that we see and the changes that we would advise individuals to make to maximize their plan that they're a participant in, I want to ask you a couple questions, okay? And I want you to answer these questions for yourself. And if your answer to a lot of these is, I don't know, it's time to talk to somebody about your 401k plan, or at least take it upon yourself to do a little bit more research and actually sign into your profile. Click around, look into the options and the information provided to you, and get answers to these questions, because we're going to look at even small mistakes, the compounding impact that they're going to have on the lifetime value of your K plan when you retire. So here's the questions I want you to ask yourself. How much are you paying in fees? Do you know the answer to that? Is it 1%? Is it 0.5%? Is it 0.25%? Is it 2%? If you don't know the answer to that question, it's time to find out. Now, number two is, who or what are you paying in fees? And this is equally important, because who you're paying in fees is going to dictate how you solve this problem if you do believe that your fees are too high. Okay, so there are probably a lot more 401k fees than you realize. There's an advisor fee for whoever financial advisor is managing the plan and selected those investment options for you. There are oftentimes platform fees those are usually, not always, but usually the smallest fee. It's a small fee for the platform provider of, who this 401k plan is administered by. Then there's fund fees, and these can be very high. We're going to talk about a couple specific ones and names to look out for, but there are American fund fees in 401k plans that we've personally looked at that are over 1%. And we're going to talk a little bit later in the episode about how unbelievably impactful the compounding effect of losing 1% to fees every year is on the lifetime value of your 401k account. But know what you're paying in fees. If you are paying a lot of fees and you're realizing that your investments are not growing the way you want them to, you need to know, is it because the advisor is super expensive? Is your company just using an expensive platform? Or is the fund lineup available to you too expensive and you need options that are a little bit cheaper that you can choose to invest into? Number three is, how much money do you have in your 401k? This should be the easiest question to answer, but I'll be honest, it's probably one of the answers we get the least. When we work with people, how much do you have in your plan? I'm not sure. I haven't signed in recently. You need to know how much money is in your 401k plan. It's the fundamental concept of when you can retire. How much money will you have when you retire? If you switch jobs, how much money will you now have in an IRA to manage for your retirement? You have to know how much money is in your 401k plan, okay? And then number four, when can you retire? If you don't know the answer to even one or two of these, it's time to look into the tools available to you in your 401k portal and get these answers. If you don't know when you can retire, you need to think about what that is. On your current trajectory, what is the answer to when you could retire? And now, if that answer isn't good for you, you might want to consider lowering your fees and therefore increasing your returns, or contributing more each paycheck to your 401k plan so that you get back on track to retire when you want to retire. Okay, so no shame. If you don't know the answer to these questions, let me make this very clear. There's no shame, there's no judgment to not know the answer to these questions right off the bat. And unfortunately, the industry Financial advisory sucks, guys. The amount of misinformation, what would you call it? Murky information, half-truths that people get so that it sounds more complicated than it actually is, and then the advisor can sell you on whatever they want. The high fees, the high barrier to entry to actually start to understand your own accounts. The industry sucks, and it's hard to slowly make dents in improving the industry. That's what we try to do with things like podcasts, to educate people. But there's no shame if you don't have the answer to these questions. The industry is designed for the advisor to profit, not you, okay? But let me make it clear. If you don't know the answer to these questions, that's unacceptable, guys, okay? There's no judgment, but you need to fix it. You need to know where your money is so that you can make informed decisions for your retirement and ultimately probably the benefit of your children when you eventually pass away. All right, so here's how now to maximize your 401k plan. How do we fix these problems when we've answered these questions for ourselves? And what effect do these choices have on the lifetime value of our account? Now, before I get into this, the meat of the episode, I'm going to give you a quick little kind of rundown. I think James called it an ad. It's not really an ad. It's for us. But I want to talk about a promotion we're doing. Okay, so just for the month of May, just for podcast listeners, we are doing free financial planning meetings, okay? It's that simple. You come in, you can talk about any or all of the investments that you want to. You can bring in and talk about your spouse's investments. You can come in as a couple. As long as you're a listener, you can schedule your free meeting with the link in the episode description and meet with us to talk about your investment. And if you can't find the answers to these questions, these are some of the questions that we can answer for you, okay? So what is a financial planning meeting? There's really two elements to it, I would say, in terms of the real benefit that you get by having a free meeting with a professional financial advisor. Number one, you're going to get a portfolio review or a portfolio score. You can think about it. So we're going to ask you questions like, when do you want to retire? How old are you now? How much do you have in investments? What's the return that you're getting? What investments are you already in? And then we're going to use your answers to your life questions, like when do you want to retire? How much money do you make? What are your financial goals? What are your life plans? And then we're going to analyze your portfolio and see, are your current investments in line with those goals? Or do we give a pretty negative score to your overall portfolio, and there's probably shifts that need to be made if you truly want your investments to line up with your life goals, okay? And then number two is the forward thinkingness of it, okay? So we can talk about everything, your homes, your investments, your spouse's investments, your income, what's your fixed income like, Social Security, pensions, what does that look like in retirement? And for a lot of people, this is the first time ever that you're going to get a full picture of your finances, because I guarantee you, when you ask yourself those four questions, unless you've really been actively researching or you have an advisor that you work with, when I ask you a question like, when can you retire? Even if you knew the answer in your own 401k plan to those first three questions I asked, how much do you pay in fees? What are you paying in fees? How much money is in the account? What you probably don't know is, well, is my 401k combined with my spouse's situation, does that put us in a position to retire? So a lot of people never really get, because usually it costs thousands of dollars to have a comprehensive financial plan from a financial advisor. And so they never get a complete picture to really answer those questions. We help look forward, look at the totality of your financial situation in line with your life and financial goals. And we make sure that they're aligned, and we give you answers to these questions like, how much money will you have in retirement, and when can you retire, so that you can start planning for retirement now. And it doesn't matter how old you are, having answers to those questions is always beneficial for you. All right, we're back. Feel free to schedule that free financial planning meeting in that link, but we're back to the meat of the episode. Let's get back into how do we fix common problems that you're probably making in your 401k plan, and how is that going to benefit you in the long term? Number one is invest with purpose, okay? So this goes a little bit back directly to the questions I asked you. How much are you paying in fees? How much money is in the account? When can you retire? Most people pick a number. We just established a 401k plan for a company. It's the third one we've done so far this year. And what we do when we set up a 401k plan with a client is we have a full staff meeting. We have an entire training where we talk about investments, compound interest. What are the exact terms of the plan that you're in? What are the general investing principles that you can manage? And then we do one-on-one meetings with each individual in the plan to not only talk about the 401k plan and their elections based on risk tolerance and based on time horizon and all of those things, but also factoring in their other investments and their other incomes to see how can their 401k plan factor into their big picture, okay? And what we see when we have these one-on-one meetings with these individuals is we get a lot of arbitrary numbers, okay? And if you've met with us, no shame, not trying to call anyone out here, but we get a lot of, let's do $150 per paycheck. I guarantee you if we engaged in the Socratic method and ask, well, why 150? Well, why do you want to retire then? How do you know you can retire if you give? They don't have answers to those questions. Just, well, I kind of know what my budget is. Maybe I can afford more than 150, but it seems comfortable for me. So sure, $150 per paycheck. That doesn't help you achieve your goals, because if you don't have answers to these questions and you're not investing with a purpose, maybe $150 per paycheck is how much you'll need to retire. When you want to retire, it might be overwhelmingly less than you need to retire. And you're going to really wish that you had these type of conversations and these answers 10 years ago where you could have actually been on track. And now you're in your 50s, you're putting arbitrary amounts in your 401k and have no idea if or when you're ever going to retire. So you need to have projections or at least some form of financial plan. It doesn't have to be a professional financial plan for a financial advisor. Usually that's helpful, but it doesn't have to be. You can just start putting some numbers together for yourself. There's very easy free future value calculators online where you need to say, how much time do I have till I want to retire? First, you go with want, and then you see if it's realistic. Well, I want to retire at 63, and I have this many working years. And I can see based on the fund choices that I've made, I'm looking at the historical returns of those funds. Doesn't guarantee the future, but it's the best you can do. What am I going to get per year? And then put that into a future value calculator to say, how much do I have to make per deposit to be on track to retire? And if that number is way too high, then you know that you might have to work a little bit, or maybe you can rearrange your budget to put in that higher amount in your 401k plan, invest with a purpose, and hit your financial goals when you want to hit them. Number 2 is lowering fees. Look, fees have a massive compounding effect on your account. And to show you just how big the effect is, I'm going to run 2 scenarios by you. Okay, so I'm going to assume that someone has 30 years. Okay, so 30 years, you're maybe 35, you want to retire when you're 60. Okay, and I'm not going to use a dramatic fee difference. These are tangible examples of fund choices that we've seen people make and then change, okay? It's very common in a fund lineup to see funds like American funds where the fund fee could be between 0.5 and 1.25%. They can be very, very high. So you could be losing 1% each year just in fees for the management of that fund, okay? So here's what even 0.75% does to your account over 30 years. And I'm assuming $12,000 a year. And that just means $400 per paycheck plus a small matching contribution from your employer. This is high for a lot of people, but it's a little over $1 million in retirement. So it's a good number. A lot of people try to aim for something close to that. And it shows the effect at least. It might not be the exact numbers for you, but so if you invest for 30 years, that $12,000 per year, and you're getting 8%, that's about $1.3 million. If you invest and you're only getting 7.25%, not even a full percent extra in fees, you're just paying an extra 0.75% in fees, it's $1.18 million. So that is a $200,000 mistake, so to speak, over the course of 30 years by paying large, American fund fees to be in a managed account instead of just dumping your money into the S&P 500 and looking for ETFs and low-cost funds that mirror similar indexes to those more expensive funds. You might be asking yourself, why the heck would I ever be in an American fund when they have such high fees? Okay, and so I think it's important to talk about, why do funds have fees? And if you do your own research online, what you'll see, a lot of people talk about the fact that American funds are one of the more expensive options. They're very common because they often lead to high commissions or fees for the advisor on the account. So that's kind of the dirty side of the business, okay, is you can make a lot of money as an advisor by pushing American funds, and often people at big companies like Edward Jones is getting a kickback for using those funds, so they encourage and they pressure their advisors to choose American funds and other similar managed funds. But there is a purpose to them. They're not just useless and overpriced. If you do some research on your own, you'll find that advisors will say, and other third parties will say, a lot of times these funds have lower down years. So they're managed in order to help reduce portfolio risk. So that's why it's really important to understand the purpose of fund fees. You don't care about the risk balance within reason. I'm not saying invest in individual companies, and you almost never can in a 401k anyways. But if you're invested in the total market, that has a beta of 1. That is the market. Anything else is more or less risky than the market. If the entire S&P 500 collapses, good luck, we're probably all dead. That's the entire 500 biggest companies in the United States. Okay, so now they can fluctuate more year to year, but you don't need to get 1% in fees plus maybe 0.5% less in performance on average per year because they're lowering your risk by actively balancing and managing the portfolio. If you're 35 years old, you can ride the market. And I'm going to explain just how much you can ride the market here with point number 3, which is stop being so scared in your 401k account. Now, there are people who are getting close to retirement and rebalancing portfolios to be less risky in the last 3 to 5 years of your career. That has a lot of merit, okay? I'm not saying every single investor in the entire country should always take full market exposure with their investments, but this is what I'm saying. If you're a millennial, I'll make you some money. If you're a millennial, you remember the 2007, financial crisis, right? 2007 to 2009. It was a very, very, very bad recession. So if you look at the S&P 500 and there's a point score for the S&P 500 that kind of determines the level that it's at. Okay, so in October of 2007, it was at 1,500. By March of 2009, which is pretty much the bottom of that recession, it was at 683. Okay, so the account had lost more than half of its value. The market was down more than half. A lot of people panicked, okay, when this happened. And a lot of people lost a lot of money because they panicked. And if you look at the trajectory and the recovery of the market, it took about until February of 2013. So it was about 4 years before the money rebounded. Okay, so if you were 65 when that happened, there's people that were just screwed. They needed money. They needed income from their retirement. They couldn't wait 5 years, 4 years. And they lost 40, 50% of their portfolio because they had to liquidate large sections to pay medical bills with no flexibility, okay? But if you're anybody other than a late 55 to 60-year-old and you had just waited 4 years, your entire balance would have returned and you would have had your full value back. And then this is where it gets really interesting. You look at the COVID crash, which was the next most significant crash in recent history. In February of 2020, the S&P 500 was at 3327. So already you can see we're 13 years later and your money has more than doubled, okay? That's the importance of just being diligent and staying in the market. It's at about 3,300. The next month, March of 2020, it was down to 2,500. So over 800 basis points down. Doing some quick math in my head, it's between 25 and 30% that the market went down, okay? Now, here's two super interesting things about this. This recovered much quicker. So by, let's see here, about August of 2020, so 5 to 6 months later, the value had already returned and the market was at 3,500, okay? That's already great news for anyone who's worried about market downturns. But here's the even more interesting stuff. Remember what I just told you. The highs before the 2007 financial crisis were 1,500. The low after COVID was 2,500. So if you just stay in the market, the worst day of 2020 was still over 50% higher than the highs before the financial downturn before it. So if you just ride the wave and you stop being so scared when you're in your 30s, 40s, or even early 50s, you can have so much more money in your 401k account by lowering fees, by understanding that earlier on in your life, you don't need to be paying over 1% every year of your account value to a managed fund that's trying to lower your risk when your primary goal shouldn't be lowering risk. It should be growing the value of your investments, okay? And then as you get later on and when you're in your late 50s and you're starting to think about retirement, then you can look at options. Well, maybe I balance out with some market exposure, some bonds. Maybe I'm in some American funds that are managed to lower risk. I'm okay taking only 6 to 7% return a year instead of 10% because I can't afford the market to plummet in the year that I want to retire. Those are all very, very, very valid concerns. But I would argue, and this is not advice for you in particular, whoever you are listening to this, but for most people, that should not be your primary concern in your 20s and 30s and 40s. And if you make it your primary concern, or you just don't realize the fees you're paying in your account and they're costing you money, the earliest part of your investment career, the compounding effect by having so much less money early on is going to be tens or $100,000 mistakes when you retire because of the value that you're costing your account. All right, let's recap real quick, guys. If you're invested in any sort of employer-sponsored plan, I've been talking about 401k plans. Most all of this applies to 457s, 403bs, all sorts of other employer-sponsored retirement plans, city-sponsored retirement plans, whatever you're in, okay? The principles are still true. Know what you're paying in fees. If you don't know, log into your account right now. If you can't find the answers, contact the administrator of the plan. Say, I just want to know, what's the advisor fee? What are the platform fees? What are the fund fees I'm paying? The fund fees will all be there. When you're choosing the allocation of what you're invested in, you should be able to find historical performance, fund fees. A lot of times these are called expense ratios. That's the expense percentage you're paying each year to be in this fund. You need to get answers to all these questions. You need to invest with a purpose and start answering questions for yourself of what do I need when I retire and when will I retire, so that right now you can be putting in money into your 401k to meet those goals instead of just randomly throwing money in the pan and hoping the recipe's done by the time you retire. It's got to be a botched metaphor. I don't know why you'd throw money in a pan. Don't really know what I was going for there, but hopefully that made sense to our listeners here. So invest with a purpose, know your fees, and understand your primary goals based on the investment stage of your life that you're in. It's okay to accept some market risk early on in your investment career. You should have answers to these questions. You shouldn't just listen to this episode and then say, cool, I want to be as risky as possible. That's also not planned, right? So do your own research or meet with your advisor and make informed decisions that correctly balance your risk tolerance with your investment choices, and make sure that those choices are designed to meet your goals and aren't just random objectives and random numbers you've set for yourself because they sound good. All right. Thank you for listening to another episode. Remember, you can sign up for a free financial planning meeting at the link in this episode. We hope to talk to you individually. We'd love to help you understand these concepts and get you on track towards a great retirement. Always share these episodes with others, spread the word, let everybody know they can all get free financial advice and content and information in bite-sized, in quotes, 15-minute episodes. Spread the word with anybody you know that can utilize this information. We'll see you next time. And as always, invest early, invest often.